Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to the next Blender tutorial. I can't remember what the number is. Today we're going to continue with our model of the apartment building, and I'm going to show you how to start to add some textures to that building. And the whole purpose of this is to move beyond that sort of plain grey 3D model to something that starts to become visually more interesting, and we can work towards a rendered output where we can have a bit more control over what the model looks like. So if you see this preview here, this is kind of what we'll end up with, or something pretty close to that. I might save the lighting and rendering for the next tutorial to do that properly. But what we're going to learn to do is how to get the tiled textures onto the building, and how to have, the two different textures here and the window frames and so on and so on. Now, an important thing to remember is that, this looks okay, but, actually if we return to our source material, nope, that's not it. Where's our source material? It should be, nope. Okay, it's here, right? Here's our source material. So you can sort of see that what I've done here on the left-hand side in Blender is still very, very basic. I've basically just got these two different types of tiles and a material for the pipe. What's missing is, all of the details that make it interesting. My tiles are probably a little bit too clean. I haven't done the air conditioners or the other pipes and so on. But the purpose of this tutorial is just to show you the basic operations of how to texture your model. And then what we're going to do is I will point you to some more specialized tutorials for really how to take these basic ideas up to the next level and with a bit more sophistication. But for now, I will get you up to this point, and then we'll go from there. Okay, so back to Blender. All right, so what we have here is, I should just turn off rendered mode here. What we have here is the same model from last week, but I've added these tiled textures. So I'll just go back to where we were up to last week. So that should be here. Won't bother saving that, that's okay. All right. Now what we want to do is go back to the small part that we modeled, which was our building monomer, I believe we called it. Where is it? It's hiding down here. And because we're working procedurally, obviously we're not going to have to worry about texturing every single apartment on every floor of the building. We're just going to do it for one floor of our apartment, and then that will end up texturing everything else. Now, it's a slightly slow process, but it's just one of those things that it's part of the pipeline. And to learn these skills, you're not always going to be in the situation of having to copy photographs, but you will always have to understand the relationship between these gray materials here and how to move them into the sort of rendered textured models that we're used to seeing in computer generated images. Okay, so let's get started. Now, if you remember from last week, what I did is I kept a copy of the original building monomer. So I'm going to hide our group of buildings, and I'm going to go back to this group that I made last week. And in this group, I kind of kept all my objects separate here, and it just makes life a little bit easier to have a copy of all the original objects in this group. So what we're going to do is I'm going to add the tiled texture. I'll just might make this smaller and bring up my photograph here. I'm going to add the tiled texture that you see, that you can see here. I think we're getting a bit of an interference pattern there. I'll add these two tiled textures, and then for the other textures, we'll probably just use a plain color. But the reason that I'm working with these two textures of the tiles is to show you how to separate different materials onto the same object, and how to do little nice things like making sure that the tiles are the right size and that they're sort of facing the right direction and that they line up and things like that. Okay, so the first thing we have to do is just some basic checks on our model. Now, if I look at my building monomer, we can see that back when we were working on this, we haven't applied the scale. So if I go to texture this, things will already be a bit jumbled up. So I'm going to apply the scale just to set that first. So I hit Control A and scale. Whoop. No, I select my object, Control A, scale. Okay, there we go. So having hit Control A and scale, now if I click on the building monomer, which is just the main kind of rectangle of the building here, you can see that scale is all now set at 1. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put just a testing texture onto this model. And what that'll do is it'll show us, I guess, what we need to fix in order to wrap that tile texture around the building. So we're going to go into we'll go into the shading tab first. So if you look up here, you can see the shading tab. If I click on that here, it's just going to rearrange the workspace, and the viewport has shifted down into material preview mode, and it's giving us this node editing workspace here. These nodes are basically like when we have all these various sort of input-output little boxes, and nodes are a way that you'll find them in a bunch of different software, from 3D software to things like Max MSP. It's often something that reads from left to right that describes a process, basically. And in the node editor, this is where it's sort of the most convenient way to develop a texture. So the first thing we're going to do is, in this object here, it's got a material on it, which by default, it's just added a plain material here that's called material. We're going to change its name to UV test material. Whoop, my caps lock is on. Let me just type that a little bit less shouty. UV test material, just so we know what it is. Okay, now if I clicked on the base color here and opened it up, we could change the color of the object. And if I go into solid mode, we won't see that color at all. We only see the color when we're either in rendered mode or material preview. Okay, so we could change the color like this, but to texture it, what we want to do is add on a material that shows us at the moment how Blender thinks it should wrap on an image onto the outside of this 3D model. And usually when we get started, the way that Blender wants to wrap an image on here needs a little bit of correction, and that's the process that we're going to go through. So I'm going to get what's called a UV checking material. So I think I've got one here. Let me just remember where I've put it. My Dropbox. Okay, now in this file browser, you can actually just click and drag your image like this. It's quite convenient. And when you click and drag an image, such as a JPEG or a PNG image, it makes what's called like an image file node. But if you want to do it another way, you can go Shift A, and it should be texture, image texture, and it makes the same thing. And basically, it's just a little, if you click to open here, it would bring you to a file picker and you could find the image. Okay, I'll just delete that extra one. Now, so this file node here has connected this image, and I'll show you what it's going to do. And I'll put this image in the Dropbox for you later. But basically, this image is a grid that has a whole bunch of numbers and letters and colors. And most importantly, when we look at this image normally, all of these should be squares. Maybe I'll just show you what these usually look like. UV checker material is something like this. This is the type of image we're looking at. In fact, this is probably the one that I've got here. So this is the JPEG image that I've just attached to my Blender model. Now, we can see a lot of things are wrong with this image. In some areas, it's almost right. In some areas, it's ridiculously stretched. Here, it's all squashed. Basically, what we're looking at is the entire history of modeling our original cube onto this part of the apartment building. And technically what we're looking at is the UVs. Now a UV, the easiest way to explain this, if I go to the UV editing tab, UVs are a two-dimensional texture space that tells a 3D program how to map an image onto the polygon surface of an object. And it's really at the heart of how we move from this sort of plain gray objects to something like the image I was showing you earlier. So what we have to do, I'll go back to my material preview mode, is we need to correct all of this. And what we want to do is get this to a point where all of these colors are squares again. And that's what's called UV editing and UV unwrapping. So if I'm in the UV editing tab here, I'll go into edit mode on my object, press tab, and I'll press A to make sure that all of the faces on the object are selected. Now I'll press the letter U, and I've got a whole bunch of options here. Unwrap, Smart UV Project, Light Map Pack, Cube Projection, Cylinder Projection, Sphere Projection, etc. What most of these are telling us is different ways that Blender can recalculate how the two-dimensional space here maps onto the three-dimensional space here. If I press U again, some of them are a little self-explanatory. A cube projection basically looks at the object from 6 different points of view and projects onto them as if our object was contained inside a cube. And that works really well for rectangular or sort of regular architectural shapes like what we've got here. A cylinder projection will get my tea flask, will sort of wrap around our shape and then usually give us a top and a bottom. A sphere projection will be like if we took a map of the Earth and tried to unwrap it, or even better, if we took an orange and tried to flatten out an orange peel. A sphere projection specializes in that, and so on and so on. Now, what we're going to do is use the Smart UV project, and what that does, I might just put the link into the Blender manual to describe that exactly, but basically it tries to make some intelligent guesses as to not only how to project on our object, it's very good for architectural forms like what we've got here, but also where to cut the object. And when I say cut, I want you to think of things like unwrapping a birthday present. If you have a square box that's wrapped in paper, somewhere the paper has to fold or be cut. And UV unwrapping is exactly the same. There have to be little cuts and separate faces. And the Smart UV Project tries to guess where the best place for these things are. And when we're doing regular forms like this, it's a pretty good way to start. So this will probably take a little while, but I'm going to do a Smart UV Project, and then we're going to rearrange some of these faces in the UV space to give us something that is a little bit easier for us to understand and for us to control. Okay, so now still here, I'm going to press, with all my faces selected, I'll press U to unwrap, and then Smart UV Project, and I'll just leave these at default and hit OK. So already the result is excellent. You know, if you look at all of these squares now, they're all pretty much squares. And not only that, they're all the same size. That's excellent. But they're all kind of facing different directions. So we're going to tidy this up a little bit manually. And depending on what the texture that you want to wrap on is, sometimes it's very important to have them all facing the right way. So it's good to do a little bit of manual UV correction. Now, I want you to be aware here that the type of UV editing that I'm doing in this video is sort of like an introduction. If you think of unwrapping something more complex like a hand or a face or a plant, you know, the forms that are no longer simple and rectangular requires a lot more kind of careful planning. So think of this as an introduction to UV unwrapping and texturing, and I'll put some more detailed tutorials in the description of this video. Okay, so in the UV space, what I can do is I can just drag and select, and if I press G for grab and I move all these faces that have been developed, you can see that they're moving the way that the texture is applied on the right hand side in our viewport. That's kind of cool, and that's, you know, it's giving us sort of a real-time demonstration of what texture mapping is. It's wrapping two-dimensional images onto our three-dimensional object. So that's cool. All right, so what I want to do is just organize this a little bit, and I'm going to do maybe three things. The first is I'm going to make sure that our letters are all facing directions that make a bit more sense. Like if you look here, looks like the letters are upside down, something like that. The letters are sideways here, sideways here. So I'll move those around a little bit. And if you remember back to the image here, we've got two different colors of tiles, these brown tiles and these white tiles. So I'm going to just sort out my UVs as well in the same order. All right, so now you just notice something happened there. When I clicked here, all of my UVs disappeared here. And we think, oh no, we've lost everything. Well, no, we haven't lost anything at all. What happens with UV editing is that when you have a face selected, its UV will appear in the UV editor. So if you want to see all the UVs, just press A for all, and they'll all appear again. So that's that little secret. Now, okay, let's have a little look around the UV editing window here. In the top left-hand corner, we have something kind of similar to what we see in edit mode in the 3D viewport. We have vertex select, edge select, face select, and then one more, which is called island select mode. And if you hold your mouse over any of these, it'll tell you what they are. And much like in the edit mode of the 3D viewport, here when I press 1, 2, 3, I can switch between those different selection modes. In the UV editing menu, I can press 1, 2, 3, 4 and quickly switch between them. So, vertex selection mode, pretty self-explanatory. We're going to select vertexes of our UVs, and if I press G for grab, I can move them around. Right click to undo. If I press 2, I'll select an edge, and if I press 3, I'll select a face. If I press 4, I'm going to select an island, like this. And so you can see that with that, what was it called, Smart UV Unwrapping, it's cut the birthday present, cut the wrapping paper into different groups, which we call islands. So that's really handy. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to quickly sort these islands out so I can kind of, you know, see what's going on. So if I grab this one, press G for grab, I might just have a look under here. I reckon of course it's that one. Okay, so I'm going to rotate this 90 degrees, and I'm going to rotate this one 90 degrees as well. Just as a start, so that maybe my letters are facing the right way. So with this one selected, if I press R, 90, and then enter, okay, now it's upside down, so I'll press R, 180, and then enter. Okay, my letters are up the right way. So, okay, I might put that down here, and I might put this one down here, and R90, R180. Okay, cool. So that's kind of like the top of my building and the bottom of my building. All right. So then, what's this one? If I click on this and G for grab, okay, it's the front face. So I'm going to rotate that, R90. Okay, that's enough. So now it's facing the right way. And I'm going to move it right up to the edge of this one here. Now, if you're wondering how I'm panning around, it's much like the 3D viewport. I use the middle mouse button to zoom in here, and then shift and middle mouse button will pan me from left to right. Okay, so G for grab. Let's get that nice and close, and see how as I get this close, the textures here start to look like they're lining up, which is cool, because if I look at my image here, you know, maybe it'll be nice if the tiles on the edges matched, if they lined up. Because they're tiles, you know, tiles don't actually turn corners in real life, but if these were bricks, bricks usually do turn corners. They kind of intersect like this. So sometimes when we are texturing, we want to make it look like the texture goes around a corner. An important example might be the bark of a tree. You know, there are no straight lines or what we call a seam on the bark of a tree. So we definitely want the texture to have no visible joins. Like if I press G and move this here, we can see that seam. So instead, I'm going to match this up here, and I might actually join these together. The way we can do that is, now Blender's changed a little bit with Blender 2.9, so this is how I'm going to do it, but there might be some better tutorials out there for how the new sort of way of Blender joining textures together works. Okay, so I'm going to use snapping, and I'll set it to vertex, and I just want to check that if I press G and X, okay, that this vertex is underneath this vertex. And I'll press G and Y, and now these are right on top of each other. I'll press Shift Tab. When I press Shift Tab, it's just turning my snapping on and off. So I'll turn my snapping off now, press 1 to go into vertex mode. I'll just drag select these two vertexes here. If you can see here, I'll show you that there's one here. Ooh. That's strange, it's merged already. That can't be right. Let me just undo a little bit. Okay, so there's two vertices here. Now if I go in close here, that's, okay, I'm honestly surprised. That's already joined together. Okay, so I'm learning something new about how Blender's new mode of texture editing works. Okay, I might just undo that, and I'll show you what I was going to do. There might be a cause to do this later. So if I just press G, Y here and move these down, basically what I was going to do is merge these two vertices together by selecting them both and hitting M and merging by distance like this. But it seems that that's actually unnecessary. That's very interesting. So if I press 4 to go into island mode and press G, Y, I'll go put my snapping on G, Y and snap them there. Now go into island mode. Wow, okay, they've joined all by themselves. That is very interesting. All right, well, I'm learning in real time. Fantastic. Okay, so now that I've joined these two islands together, let's join a few more and start to, you know, join these pieces of the puzzle back together. So if I grab this face here, I think I can guess which one it's going to be. Yeah, okay, it's going to be that front face there, which if I look back at my picture, maybe I'll get my picture on the screen. We can also see that that's going to be one of the brown parts here. So I might just zoom in to get rid of that. Interference pattern. All right. So, okay. So this is the face we were dealing with. If I G for grab, I can see that it's the front here, but I want to also rotate it. So I'll press R, 90, enter. It's still upside down, so R, 180, enter. Okay. There's my face. And where will we join it? It's probably going to join onto this top edge here. So if we zoom in here and I press grab and get in nice and close, yeah, you can see where it's going to line up already. So let's try that snapping trick again. So if I press GX with snapping on, and then GY. And now if I go into island mode, whoopee, okay, that's already sewn it together. So now if I move, turn my snapping off, if I move that whole group, okay, fantastic, that's all sewn together. Look at that. Okay, so let's just keep organizing our UVs a bit. Now, to remind you, of course, we're doing a very simple type of UV unwrap, and I'll post some more complex examples for you. And maybe we'll come back to this when we're doing some more complex shapes in the future of the course. But okay, so we've got this face here. Now that, I believe, we can just put here, because, oh, is that right? Use your brain for a second, Peter. Yeah, I think it should be. Maybe the scale is a bit off. But if I look at the image here, zoom out a little bit. Yes, that will also be white tile, because most of this exterior is white tile. Okay, so I'll press G for grab, bring it in, and I think part of this is a little bit out of scale. Yeah, it is a little. So let's scale it down on the y-axis, like this, grab it. Okay, now things are lining up a bit better. Okay, so the scale operations in the UV editor are exactly the same as the scale operations in the viewport. They're just in 2 dimensions rather than 3. So with this island selected, I just pressed S and then Y, and I scaled it much like we were scaling things in our 3D editor last week. I'll hit right click to undo, and I think I want to scale that down a little bit more. Yeah, it's pretty good. Now, I'll just bring that nice and close. I might not bother joining this one together because that face is always going to be hidden if you think about our building. You know, once we flip this over and flip it around, we're never going to see this face. So I'm just kind of putting it there for good housekeeping. Now, let's see, what have we got here? Okay, so this is going to be our brown tile section. See where it's moving? It's this brown section here. So I will R90 enter to get it facing up the right way. And I'm going to leave it up on top here, just so I know where everything is. G for grab, what's this one? Maybe something around the side. Yep. Okay, so let's R90, grab that, pop it over here. Now, okay, here's an interesting thing. I have 2 places where I could sew this. If you look at when I grab this object, I could either join it together on this edge or on this edge. And now we have choices like this all the time in UV unwrapping. And sometimes you just have to pick one. And there's a pretty obvious choice here, that this layer, unless you're on the top floor of the building, will always be invisible because it's going to be sandwiched in between all of the other layers of the building. Whereas here, we're always going to see this corner. It's right on the edge of the building here. So we should definitely sew it here so that we don't have a seam, so that our tiles will always wrap around. So let's join it to this edge. G for grab. Now let's use that snapping trick again. Shift tab to get our snapping on. G, and I'm just going to let it go straight into that vertex. Fantastic. Okay. So you can see now if I go in close that we're perfectly wrapping around this edge, and if I turn my snapping off and I hit G, you can see that our texture is wrapping around that corner now. Okay, so what else have we got? We know what that is. G for grab, I'm guessing this is probably the back. I mean, also going to be another hidden face, so not something we really need to worry about that much, but I'll just rotate it this way. And actually, I might actually rotate this so it's completely upside down, just because I'll show you that that's the way, if we were going to connect this, it would actually have to be upside down, because in order for this to wrap around, it would be upside down now. So I may as well join it together. Turn my snapping on, and there we go. Okay, so now we're getting our UV map a little bit more sort of organized. Let's just do a little bit more. Make sure I'm in island select. Now these, oh, my snapping is still on. Shift tab to turn off my snapping. If I press grab, now I think I know what these are. I can't see what they're doing, but I think they're probably the squares that are behind our windows. Now, we're obviously not going to see these at all, but just so that we can tell what we're doing, I'm going to hide our windows here. And you can see why it's convenient to have all of this still be separate. So now, yeah, okay, so it was one of our windows. So I will just put it in the same area as where all of our brown tiles are. So I'm guessing this is probably another one. Okay, now here I'm going to put it down here because this is in kind of in the white section. We're not going to see this anyway, so it's not really important. But okay, so now here this will be in the white section. Maybe I'll rotate this R90. It's probably going to go in there somewhere because that's the front of our building. So it's probably going to, oh, okay, we can kind of, sometimes we can tell that it's rotated the wrong way because obviously this part should join up here. So R180, and I'll turn my snapping on, Shift Tab, G, and let's snap it right in there. Okay, now that's wrapping around nicely. Turn my snapping back off. What's this one? G for grab. Okay, it's the other part of the ledge. So I'll bring it down here. 90. Yep, that looks like that'll work nicely. Turn on my snapping, Shift Tab, G, snap that in there. Okay, what have we got left? Now, you'll notice I'm turning my snapping on and off quite a lot because when the snapping is on and you try to move something, it's really annoying because it's always just looking for the closest vertice. So if you turn it off, you can just, quickly move around again. So this one is going to be white tiles because it's the side of the building there. So I'll put it down here and it's upside down. So R180, 180 degrees, hit enter. And can we sew it onto anything? It actually kind of belongs in here. Okay, so now here's a trick we're going to do. You can actually overlap the UVs in the texturing space. Again, sometimes I would caution against this. It really depends on what you're working on. For us right now, I think it'll be okay because I do want this edge to have the tiles wrap around it. But if we're doing things like a face where it's got skin textures or, there are a lot of examples where we don't want to have UVs overlapping like this. But in this example, it won't cause us a problem. So I'll turn my snapping on there and just G for grab, snap it in there. And I think we'll be okay. Now, I'll just turn my snapping off. What are all these? Oh, I think we can guess what these are. They're probably all of these little bits inside the windows. Yep. Okay. So also things that will be completely invisible in our render, but technically they're going to be in the brown section. So I'm going to guess that all of these are those windows. So I'll just select them and bring them down here. What's this one? Sorry. What are these? Oh, I see. Yep, they're the bottom window ledges, so I'll also put them in the same place. Yep, all the window pieces. Now this, I guess it's probably got something to do with this ledge, does it? Oh, I see. It's the eave. It's the underside of the white tiled area. So let's also rotate it. 90, and it would go, technically, it would go kind of in here, I think. Yeah, so let's leave it in there. So Shift Tab, Snap, G, pop it in there. Okay, so again, all of this stuff with overlapping UVs, there are other circumstances where we would not overlap them like that. But for now, I think we'll be okay. What have we got here? Whoops, my snapping is still on. Shift Tab, turn that off. G for grab. Where's this face? Or maybe it's like in there somewhere. Yep. Okay, so that's upside down. So R180. Okay, so that means it kind of belongs in here somewhere. It's probably going to be there. Like, no. Ah, okay. Turn off my snapping and grab it out again. Looks like its scale is a little bit off. Something's not quite right there. What have we done wrong here? Let me just grab these faces. What's here? That's the front. Yeah, so it should be wrapping on here. Or... oh, okay, it should be up here. Oh, that's a little bit closer. Okay, yeah, our scale is just a little bit off. So see if I line up one of these vertices here. See how this one's not lined up here? And see how our texture is all sort of a little bit off? I guess that when the automatic UV unwrap was done, again, it didn't get the scale perfect. So I'm just going to scale it down a little bit on the y-axis. Oh, looks like a few parts of it are wrong. I'll just grab an edge at a time then. GY. Maybe I'll snap. GY. GY. Okay, that's better. Okay, that's done it. Alright, so not too bad. Now, oh, what have we got left? That's up here. Oops, my snapping is still on. Oh, that's another window. Okay, another inside a window. Okay, that's the front of our ledge here by the look of it. Yep, okay. So R180, no, sorry, R90. What have we got there? Okay, I'm just going to snap that in there. Shift tab. Okay. And turn off my snapping. What are these last two? Oh, I see. In here. And in there. Okay, so I'll bring them down here. And you can kind of see the problem with me being a bit lazy and overlapping my UVs here is that I've got a bit of a mess in here now. So if I R90, R90, I'm just gonna, I'll continue with this. So snap that in, and oh no, that was a terrible snap, wasn't it? Let's undo that. Turn off my snapping. Okay, it's rotated the wrong way. R90, R90. Okay, so now if I bring it in, okay, that lines up better now. Okay. And also, the scale is not quite right again, so I'm going to go into edge select mode and, sorry, edge select like this. G, Y. Oh, my snapping's turned off, that's why. Okay, that's better. Okay, now turn off my snapping. Let's look at this last face. Okay. Now which way is it facing? Let's look for, this is why the letters are really helpful, because they can always tell us which way we're facing. R90. That's actually back to front. See how the letters, oh maybe it's upside down. R180. Oh yeah, just upside down, that's all. So now we want to rotate it one more 90 degrees so that the letters kind of, is that right? What I'm looking for is this R connecting here, but I think we're completely upside down now. So R180, I think that should be about right. And and because it's out of scale, I'll just have to snap. Oops, turn on my snapping. This edge here, and this edge here. Oh, is that the correct edge? Yes. Okay, so what we've got now is a reasonably sort of slightly quick and hasty, but I've just shown you the very, very basics of organizing a UV map so that we understand how our textures work and we can have some control over how they all connect to one another. And as I said, I will refer you to some far more specialized and focused tutorials that show you or give you some more challenging UV unwrapping exercises with more complex forms. And the best way to learn UV unwrapping is, you know, do a complex object like a human hand or something like that, and you'll learn all the little skills just by having to do them over and over again. Okay, but what we've got here now, if I drag select this, we should have all of our white tiled area here, and here all of our black tiled area. Now the reason I've organized them this way, for an animation it's not such a big deal, but when you're doing an object for a computer game, having your textures organized into sections like this can be a little bit easier when later on you want to compile everything into what's called a texture map, where you know where all the different parts of your textures are going. Okay, so now let's change this number and letter pattern into a UV texture, into these tiles. So I did a couple of things for this. The first thing I did is I just took a more zoomed in photograph of the tiles. So this is from, again, me looking out my window but with a zoom lens, and I took a picture of the tiles, and I did it for the brown tiles and for the white tiles. Now you can go up to a building and just, you know, capture some textures with your camera phone. You can take textures from trees or from the ground, from all sorts of things, and they will work pretty well. But what I'm going to show you now is the difference between okay textures and professional textures. So let's put on my kind of quickly made texture and we'll see how it works. Okay, so I can go out of edit mode now, press tab, and I'll go back into the shading menu. And we can see that we've still got this, I might just maximize this now. We've still got this UV test material here. But we're actually going to get rid of that material and add a new one. So I'll press minus and I'll start a new one here. And I'm going to call this white tiles. Okay. Now I will go into wherever I put my white tiles. Just let me find that. Now I think it should be in my course folder. Just let me navigate through my stuff. Give myself a bit more space here. Teaching folder, my media folder, and I've got my white tiles. So I'm just going to drag that in here and connect my color to my color. Okay, interesting. Definitely got the white tiles there. Not quite sure if we've got the right scale. The tiles are, you know, maybe like 50 centimeters wide or something like that. A little bit too big. So there's a few ways we can change this. One simple way is if we go into the UV editing menu and I just kind of grab all the UVs and press S for scale, you know, that'll certainly work. We can make our tiles larger and smaller. But a more sort of a way to do it with a bit more control is if we go into the shading menu here, we can just add nodes that will do all of that for us. So if I do Shift A, and this time I'm going to grab a vector mapping node. I'll pop that there, left click to drag it in, and then I need an input node, which is going to be my UV map. So there's a bit of logic here. Think of it like, I don't know, it's something that happens over time. We have inputs that work their way to an output. It's a bit like an electrical circuit almost, I guess. So here for the input, I've got my UV map, which is just by default called UV map. And I'm going to connect the UV map to the vector, and then the vector to the vector. Now it doesn't look like it's done anything, but what we now have is all of these mapping controls. If I change any of these scale parameters here, we can all of a sudden edit how our UVs are applied in the texture. So I'm going to change all this maybe to 10. Okay, so we've got our tiles on our building, but now we can see where maybe that handmade texture that I made, it's not done. To me, it's not good enough. The reason is, if we zoom out, what's happening here is that, I'll go back and show you what I had in my Photoshop, or GIMP is the program I use. It looks okay here, but actually what's going on, if we zoom out, is that it's repeating over and over again. And every time it repeats, we see a little seam. And that's because at the bottom of my image, the tiles are a little bit dirty. And also, I haven't really bothered photoshopping this to make it into what's called a seamless texture. A seamless texture is like a wallpaper pattern where every time you put one next to each other, there's no join. Instead, with mine, there's a very obvious join. And we can see the seam on my tiles. But, you know, it was a nice place to start, and to make your own textures, I can send you to some really great, there's lots of Photoshop or GIMP tutorials that show you how to make a seamless texture. And it's simply a matter of doing some clever tricks where we cut it into quarters and we flip the quarters around so that every extreme side matches up. The top matches to the bottom and the left matches to the right. But anyway, we can discuss that more in class. So, okay, so this is my not so great photographic texture. And I'll show you the difference if I add a much better texture. So what I'm going to do is I will delete this white tiles node. I'll just press delete. And I have some professional textures here. So these are some textures that I've downloaded, and I'll show you the difference. So if I grab my tile here, nothing's happened yet, but if I connect the color first, you can immediately see, well, you probably can't see the difference yet, but if I connect to the vector, now you'll see there's no seams. We can't see that repeating pattern anymore. Instead, it looks quite natural. And I'll do a more advanced texturing tutorial again, and I'll show you how we can connect. I've got a lot of other texture nodes here that will give us some interesting reflections and so on. But for now, I just want to show you the very basics of unwrapping and getting the textures connected. So, okay, there we have our white tiles, but what about the brown ones? So, the easiest way to do it is you can actually have more than one texture material applied to a single object. So, what we're going to do is create a new texture. So, we will press the plus button here, hit new, and let's call this one brown tiles. Now again, I'm going to use one of the better tile sets that I've downloaded here. I think these tiles are actually black, but I hope you can forgive me, they're not brown. Okay, so now I'll drag in my tiles, set that to base color, and at the moment nothing's happening because we haven't assigned this onto any part of our model. So actually I think it's because the white tiles are probably on top. Anyhow, now I just need to add in that mapping node, or maybe I can show you. We'll assign them first. So if I go to my model here, I'm just going to select the faces in edit mode, in face select mode. So face select mode, to remind you, it's the one up here. If I go 1, 2, 3, it'll go from vertex to edge to face. Face select mode, and I'm just holding down shift and dragging and selecting all of the faces that I want to have the darker tiles on. And did I miss any? Maybe I got them all. I'll go into untextured mode to have a look. That looks pretty good. Okay, so back into, now when I'm switching modes here, to remind you, I'm pressing Z and just moving my mouse really quickly into the direction I want. Okay, so now that I have these faces selected, with the brown tiles material here still selected, I'm just going to press assign. And so what that's done is it's told Blender that, okay, there are two different materials on this object, and on these faces we have the black tiles or the brown tiles. But I haven't added on that mapping node, so these tiles are still way too big. So I'll hit Shift A down here and input. I'll create a UV map and just left click to drop it there, put it to UV map, and Shift A again, and vector mapping, and connect the UV to the vector and the vector to the vector, and then change this to the same number as the other one, which I believe was 10. All right, excellent. And because all of our UVs are at the same scale, the tiles are all kind of the right size. It's all working pretty nicely. Okay, so that's the basic operation that we're going to do. Now, if we want to continue this, I guess we should bring our windows back in. And there's just some last little things I'll do. Because in our original photograph, all of this stuff is actually, it's kind of plain. Our pipes are white, our window frames are white, and then we just have glass here. So for now, I'll keep it kind of simple, but you know, what we just did to the building, you know, we could do to the pipes as well. But let's just, I'll make a new material on one of the pipes. Doesn't matter which one we start with. I'll hit new, and I'll call this white plastic. And I'm not going to do much to this at all. I might make it a little bit smoother. That makes it a tiny bit reflective, because you know that piping plastic is a little bit reflective. But we'll talk about this maybe in another tutorial as well, once we start looking at maybe shiny metal, and when we do some more reflections, I'll go into what all of this means a bit more. But for now, with this new material, I've just turned the roughness down. The base color, maybe I'll make it a little bit darker, like that. Now, we can do a really great trick here. Instead of applying this texture one at a time to every single pipe, we can do a trick. So now, which pipe did I just put it on? Pipe 3. Okay, so I'm going to grab all of the pipes, shift selecting, and I'm going to grab pipe 3 last. And now that I've got pipe 3 is the last one selected. Now in Blender, it does a cool thing. The last thing you select will be orange. Anything selected before that will be red. So the orange one is the active object. So what I'm going to do is, from the active object, I'm going to copy the material from the active object to all of the other ones I've selected in one go. So with them selected in this order, with this pipe selected last, I will hit Control L, and I will paste the materials. So now all of these pipes have the white plastic material. So that's cool. Now actually I'm going to put it on the windows too. Why not? So I'll grab the windows, because the window frames are white, and I just want to get this tutorial sort of done to show you the point. So the last thing I selected here is a pipe. So Control L again, materials. So now our windows have that same sort of grayish white material. Oh, look, just to make it obvious here, I'll just give it a color. Okay, so I've just turned them all green. We'll change that back later. What I want to do is the same trick I did to have the two different types of tile. I want the panes of glass to be glass. Okay, so I'm going to go into tab here. And actually, the last time we were working on these windows, I had the panes of glass selected. It must have been back when we were extruding the windows in. So that's convenient. So now here, I'm just going to make a new material, call it glass. And I'm actually going to use a preset that's in Blender here called Glass BDSF. And I'll turn its roughness down to 3, and I'll hit Assign. Okay, if I press Tab, because we're in Material Preview automatically has a sort of an environment reflection. So we can see already that what we've put on is reflective. Now I'm just going to repeat that for the other windows. So I left click on a window, press tab, and just by coincidence these two faces are selected, but I'll just click on one, shift select the next. Now I'm in face select, that's why it's selecting the faces. And I will, what will I do? I think I'll have to add another material here also. Add, look in my list and grab the glass, and then hit assign. Okay, I'll just do that for all of them. So I'll show you again. Tab, I've got 1, 2, 3 selected. Add a new material here into its material stack. We've already got one here called glass, and I just assign to the faces that I have selected. Once more, 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, shift select, 3, 4. Add a new material. Click glass. And assign those faces to the material. Okay, so now I can get rid of this green. So I'll just click on any of the objects that have the green on it, and I'll go to the base color in the white plastic, and I'll just turn that back to white. All right, so now what we've done is we have UV unwrapped and textured the building monomer, the original one here that we 3D modeled. So you might ask, how do we get that onto the big stack here? If you look at the big stack here has now actually inherited the the UV test material. I mean, it actually looks kind of beautiful with those colors. But we actually want to now swap out the new and improved building monomer that's been UV unwrapped properly, and get rid of this old one that still has all the stretched textures on it. So we're going to use a trick that we use to copy the materials to copy the modifier stack, as in what's making the buildings here, our arrays from last week. We're going to copy the modifiers exactly like I copied the materials on the pipes. Okay, so I'll show you how to do that. First things first, I'll go back to the building monomer group. I'll zoom in here, and I'm going to, much like last week, I'll duplicate the collection. So I've got that whole group again, and I'm going to keep my original. I always like to keep a copy of something I'm going to want to come back to. Now here, I'll press B and just drag select my group here. I'll ignore that cube, I think that's the ground. Yeah, it's the ground. So I've got everything in here selected, and I'll press Control J to join it into one object, and I'll rename it Building Monomer Unwrapped, just so I know what it is. Now, I don't actually need this group anymore, and I'm going to drag this just into my scene collection. And I can delete this group now, has nothing in it. So I can delete that empty group. And if I hide my unwrapped monomer, I've still got the original here, and I'll just keep that there. So now we have the building monomer unwrapped and the building monomer that has all of the good stuff on it. Now, remember when I said before, we can do this trick where if we select one and then the other, and we hit Control L, instead of copying the materials, we're going to copy on the modifiers. Now, I've actually done that the wrong way, so I've done it backwards. Let's press undo. Maybe I must have selected them in the wrong order. So, which order should I do? Okay, let's select the group with this, the monomer with all the array on it, and then I'll shift select just the single monomer, the new one, and I'll press Control L, modifiers. Woof, okay. Some strange things have happened. Now, what have we done wrong? I'll hide the original one. What have we done? We've done something strange, and I'm not sure what it is. All sorts of odd things have happened. Now, is there a reason for this? Aha! Yes, there is. All right. Interesting. Sometimes when you make a weird mistake and everything goes haywire, you wonder, what did I do? Now we did something, a very, very silly mistake. So I'm just going to delete. So I've got my building monomer 1. This is the one that's correct from last week. This is the one we just made where who knows what's happened. And I'll just delete all the array stacks from it. So now if I press the period here, we can find it. It's still in its correct position. We did not apply the scale. Now that's because when we joined all the objects together, perhaps some of the objects didn't have the scale applied and we've inherited a strange scale value. And because of that, the arrays that make all the buildings are based on the individual scale of the object. So if the scale of the object is not set, then all the arrays will also go a bit crazy. So with the building monomer unwrapped selected, Control A, scale, so now it's all 1 to 1. Now let's do that trick again. So if I select the original, Shift select the new one, Control L and copy the modifiers. Of course I did it the wrong way again. Select it the other way around. Control L. Gosh, I'm doing this over and over again incorrectly. Okay, there we go. We've got one other thing that's not quite right to me. Okay, one other thing we didn't apply was the location. See how these buildings are not in the same position as the old buildings? That's not okay with me. I wanted exactly what I had before. So I'm just going to undo that again because I applied the scale but not the location. And the location of this new one is probably inherited from one of the other objects as well. So I will Control A and apply all transforms. So the location is also now set at 0. Now, can we do this one more time and can I get the order right? Probably not. I've got a 50% chance. Control L, modifiers, nope. So it's the other way. You'd think I'd have remembered this by now. Select one, Shift select the other, Control L. Okay, now they're perfectly overlapped. So if I hide the old one and zoom in, hey. So what we've just done is we have retextured our monomer and now we've just replaced what was in the old array stack with the newly improved textured model. So that's where I'm going to finish this tutorial. In the next tutorial, we will look a little bit closer at texturing and we will start to introduce lighting so that you can render your model and start to have a more convincing and dramatic scene. Okay, so that's definitely long enough for this tutorial. I hope that you can follow along and texture your model, and we will continue to build on this exercise till we can make some really super interesting stuff. Okay, thanks for your attention everyone, and I look forward to seeing your progress in class. Okay,